Good morning, Nigeria. It is another beautiful week, another beautiful day, and another reason to be cheerful, to be thankful to God for witnessing another day. Today is Monday, the 29th of August, 2022, and we're coming to you live from the studio of Trust Television from the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. I am Abdulaziz Abdulaziz. Thank you for joining us.
Indeed, it's a beautiful morning. My name is Ayuba Ilya. Thank you for joining us on the show where we bring you all the analysis and perspectives on the issues that matters to you every day of the week, of course, and including the weekend as well. Thank you so much for joining.
Good morning, Ayuba, how is it? How was your weekend?
Well, it was, I would say, I didn't get a chance to rest as much as I want to.
Yeah.
You know how it is, you know, with the work. The TV is always on, so we're expected to always be up.
Yeah, always also, as much as the TV is on, you are also on. So
exactly. So
well,
that's it.
You know, that's it. You know, this is a very challenging work, and of course, we give God the glory, the fact that we are all well and healthy, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, very, very critical.
Okay, so let's go to the news headlines this morning. Bandits continue onslaught in Katsina, abduct children, gun down parents.
2023, I have no special candidate, says Obasanjo after meeting Abdusalami.
Land grabbing, Obaseki inaugurates special police squad to tackle menace.
And now to the details. Bandits have continued to make life a hell for residents of Katsina State, staging multiple attacks across the state in the last 72 hours. In attacks between Thursday and Saturday, some children were abducted while their parents were killed. On Saturday night, bandits numbering about 20 invaded Bakori community where they abducted 7 family members of one Malam Muntari Samuru, who was inflicted with machete cut. The attack, according to one Muhammad Sani, was carried out at about 8:15 p.m. when most people were observing Ishai prayers at the residence of the victim behind Bakori Comprehensive Hospital. Malam Umar Kurami, father of one of the victims, said that the bandits reluctantly spared him but went away with his child.
Meanwhile, former President Olusegun Obasanjo has stated that he has no prepared candidate in the 2023 presidential race. The former president was seen in a meeting with Peter Obi, presidential candidate of the Labour Party, had with Governor Nyesom Wike of Rivers State in London. Sources had said the Nigerian leader was pushing the candidacy of Obi. But speaking in Mina, Niger State capital, when he paid a visit to a former head of state, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, on Sunday, Obasanjo said he had a national agenda, not a preferred candidate.
Now, the Edo State Governor Godwin Obaseki has inaugurated a special police unit to check the activities of land grabbers in the state. Speaking after inspecting a guard of honor by the Special Police Squad in Benin, Obaseki said that the unit will work with the state government and Edo State Police Command to check the activities of land grabbers. According to him, these are well-trained men of the Nigerian Police Force drafted into the squad that will work closely with the Edo State Police Command and Edo State government over the next few months to check the incidents of illegal sales of land and the activities of land grabbers in the state.
Now to more news. Nasarawa State residents are counting their losses after flood destroyed property worth millions of naira in the state. Downpour caused the flood in Dadere and Tudun Adabu communities of Obi local government area of Nasarawa State on Saturday. Abubakar Abdullahi, who reports that the torrential rain that lasted several hours also destroyed farm crops, foodstuffs, among others. The report is presented from our studio.
A visit to places affected by the flood, residents of Dedere were seen searching and evacuating their property destroyed by the flood, while some were busy evacuating refuse from the drainages. Counting their losses, an aged woman, Rabi Mohammed, blind man Abdullahi Ademu, and a retired permanent secretary in the state, Ishak Bunu, who are among those whose houses were totally destroyed by the rain, described the situation as unfortunate and called on government, individuals, and other authorities concerned to come to their aid. Reacting to the incidents, the overseer of Dedere Development Area, Dauda Danladi Agbo, said the disaster sickness and impending hunger and hardship in the locality because several farmlands and foodstuffs were affected.
I've been experiencing this thing, I think, for the past 2 or 3 months, to the point that I even wrote to the Ministry of Environment. I wrote to the chairman of the local government council so that the government should come to our aid. And it is like the issue is still in the increase. It's increasing day by day. And this thing that happened is a bitter experience.
Also speaking, the Sangarin Dedere, Said Al-Hassan Balarabi, who spoke through the district head of Dedere, Hassan Abdullahi Al-Hassan, enjoined people of the area to take precaution serious against reoccurrence of the incidents and call on the state government to assist the affected persons.
As you can see, this is the situation where residents of Dedere community have found themselves this morning. The flood has rendered many homeless, as you can see them, from Dedere community in Obi local government. Audi Ilya, NBS News.
Now, faced with rapidly rising inflation and consequently high living costs, many pensioners have bitter tales to tell about how they stretch their irregular pensions round the month. Almost 80 to 90% of pensioners live from hand to mouth, with many going cap in hand begging for alms to survive. The story of pensioners across Nigeria is a hard one. In this report, Trust TV spoke with 2 pensioners in Katsina State.
Malam Garba Musa is retired local government treasurer. He is convinced that pensioners everywhere in Nigeria are in a critical condition. He probably speaks from experience. The plight of pensioners plays out every day in Nigeria, the same sad script. Thousands of them cannot even meet their basic needs, with many of their children malnourished and out of school.
Now, presently, I am sure every pensioner, particularly in Katsina State, will not say that he is in a good mood. Because of what? The federal government, if it increases salary, simultaneously, pension will also be increased. But governors, 36 in number, including Abuja, they refused whatever is to be done as regards to pensioners.
The pensioners are blaming authorities for deliberately not increasing their take-home pay, yet government allocates money to execute projects that do not impact directly on the common man. The result is this plot of continuous difficulties faced by the nation's senior citizens.
So 4,595 million times divided by 2 will give you 2,295 million. This is the total amount of money which the state government is retaining to itself, giving only half, that is 2,295 to pension. So that is we pensioners, we have to suffer.
A similar story is playing out in Kurifi town with the family of Abdurrahman Isa, a retired local government accountant. The family is having a miserable time, which is full of uncertainty, as members are regularly in court with creditors.
The problem is that you are supposed to be paid on at least 31st. Sometimes we enter first week of the month, the next month, then they used to settle us.
To Abdurrahman's wife, Saadia, they have never had it so bad. This pot was put on fire just to comfort children who have gone without food for almost 3 days.
Tsakani ga Allah yanzu rayuwa mu za mu hidi yanda muke cikin ta ma yanzu saboda kaman wajen ma fannin abinci su komi kayan bukatu da sauransu ana abin su.
The key challenge is the miserly amount available as pay in the midst of harsh economic conditions and rising inflation. How, for instance, can a family of 10 to 15 people manage 21,000 naira pension? It is disheartening that there is still a significant number of local, state and federal government pensioners who are earning below 10,000 naira monthly.
But we are suffering. What we are giving is not enough for us to feed our family, hospital problems, day-to-day activities such as Omo, we used to buy soap and other things. Because human wants, there are many, but the means of acquiring them are limited in supply.
Amid these challenges, pensioners are appealing for the immediate increase and payment of their take-home pay as at when due, so as to at least cushion some of their difficulties. Abdullahi Ismayamadi, Closed Television News, Katsina.
Similarly, amidst the current economic hardship triggered by inflation in the country, pensioners are among the worst hit set of Nigerians. Trust TV speaks to 66-year-old retired civil servant on the effects of current economic realities on him. Ibrahim Ismail reports.
Muhammad Aliyu Korau is a 66-year-old. He retired from the local education authority in Gombe State after 35 years of service, but is yet to receive his gratuity. Korau said life has been difficult as a retiree.
Na sha wahala sosai. Don an zo an tsaye da albashi na, pension kuma bai hau ba.
I suffered a lot when I reached my retirement. They stopped my salary and my pension was not coming. I struggled for 1 year, 6 months. I resorted to begging to cater for my family.
Sai dai in je ina roƙon mutane abin da zan ci abinci na gida da matsalolin yara na da sauran jinkiri ana biya sai a samu kamar wata uku, wata hudu.
There is delay in the payment of pension. The pension used to delay for 3 to 4 months, pushing me to collecting loans. One will be wondering whether to repay the loan or buy food. Korau said the plight of pensioners will affect productivity of civil servants who are still in service and not the authorities to cater for the welfare of pensioners who gave their best to public service at their prime.
Da pension da sauransu ne zai sa dukkan ma'aikaci zai rinka tunani.
Non-payment of gratuity, pension and other benefits will discourage civil servants and make them to be thinking of what will happen to them. That is why others loot billions. A person will loot money that can pay millions of workers.
Kaga yawanci duka shi yake sa su sata a jiya saci biliyoyi mutum ɗaya ya je saci kuɗaɗen da za a biya mutum miliyon shi kaɗai kawai ya je ya tafi da shi.
In 2019, Governor Muhammadu Inuwa Yahaya of Gombe State paid the sum of 1.097 billion naira to settle outstanding gratuity for retirees under the state civil service. Similarly, at the beginning of the year 2022, the Gombe State government paid 755 million naira for the payment of the second tranche of the backlog of gratuity owed to 2015 retirees in the state. The Inuwa Yahaya administration said it inherited over 14 billion naira backlog of pension and gratuities for the state and local government retirees when it came to power in 2019. This, many believe, is why some retirees like Korau are yet to be paid. From Gombe, Ibrahim Ismail reporting for Trust TV.
And in Plateau State, pensioners want review of their monthly allowances to cope with rising cost of living in the state. The pensioners said though they are receiving their monthly pension regularly, there has not been increment in their pension as stipulated by law for the past 2 decades, saying that the development is affecting their life in view of the current economic reality in the country. Ado Musa speaks to some of the pensioners in the state.
One of the main objectives of the pension reform is to ensure that every person that worked in either public or private sector in Nigeria receive their retirement benefit as and when due. Although pensioners in the state said pension is being paid regularly, it has been increased for more than 20 years. One of the pensioners, Kabir Musa, said he retired as a director with State Board of Internal Revenue for the past 20 years and still received 19,000 naira. He said such amount was not sufficient to feed the family.
You see, things are not taken into account. The present inflationary rate, with 19,000, what can you buy as a person, even to eat, even if you don't have a children, even if you don't have a child? 19,000 is too much inadequate.
Kabiru, however, said the major problems now are that some of them have not been receiving their gratuity and their pension hadn't been reviewed upward.
Since I retired 2001 up till today, I received the same pension. No one kobo has been harmonized out of it. And it will please you to know that every month I receive the sum of 19,300 and something as my yearly pension.
Corroborating Kabiru's submission, the State Secretary of the Nigerian Union of Pensions, Comrade Bulus Ibrahim, said though government had been paying their pension consistently, they had other issues which hadn't been solved by the government for many years.
In the case of payment of monthly pension, we really appreciate the government on that, because since inception of this government, there have been no month that pensioners are not being paid.
The secretary added that the union had tried all it could to see government officials or why their pension hadn't been reviewed, but their efforts was not successful.
Most of the time, we try to see government official to explain to us the issue of gratuity and other issues. Death benefit, we will not get them. They don't want to meet us. We don't know why.
With the present economic downturn in the country, the pensioners said they were finding it difficult to cope with the situation, calling on the state government to do the needful to harmonize their monthly allowances, their gratuity, and other benefits.
Wow, that's been really heart-wrenching stories of pensioners from Katsina to Gombe to Plateau. I don't know what you think of it, but really, really heart-wrenching for me because, you know, the stories are the same everywhere. You know, they are like at the lowest rung of the ladder.
Exactly. I mean, if you think about it, if those who are in active service are having to actually deal with the issues of inflation as well, then what more of pensioners, you know, who earn, you know, just a certain percentage of what they will normally earn, you know, while in service and all that. So it's really a sad one, and it's an unfortunate one. For many of them, you would see that even their wards or their children that they have trained are unable to even take care of them.
Exactly.
And so, you know, that goes to raise also the issue of senior citizens. How well are they taken care of? How is their welfare? And, you know, many of them have given a chunk of their lives, really,
to the country.
To the country.
And
then
you see
at the end
elsewhere
of the day,
that apart from their pensions, they still, you know, get some benefits like healthcare and other things. But here, I don't think so. And as you can see, no social security at all. And then, therefore, whatever they get, they spend it on food, and that is not enough, as we have seen with the family in Katsina, you know. And it was quite unfortunate that the mother had to just try to devise some means to assuage the urge by the kids to eat, even though there was no food, as the reporter says. And
of concern is, you know, the precedence that this is setting. What this means for younger people who are watching, you know, these elderly ones that have given their lives, you know, to serving the country. You know, what's there to emulate, or what's there to
lessons? What lessons to learn?
Exactly. Yes. What lessons? Because the likelihood is that for those who are in service, they are likely to now begin to compromise and to, you know, look towards corrupt means of enriching themselves, you know, while they are in service.
That's true, and that's what the pensioner in Gombe was also talking about. So we hope those, you know, with the responsibility with the authority to do the right thing on this issue will listen to this and also take some action. With this, we take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Mukhtar Suleiman, a public affairs analyst, for detailed analysis of today's newspapers. Do stay with us.
To every politician, as the campaigns gain momentum and passions begin to rise, remember, the errors of your opponents do not make you a success. Do not run down your opponent and inflame passions to violence between and among your supporters. What counts is what you plan to do for the electorate and how you intend to relieve the sufferings and bring succor. Nigeria is in dire need of patriotic leaders at all levels, leaders who will make national development their priority. Concentrate on telling the electorate what you intend to do when you get into office. Focus on making your vision clear to the electorate. Don't engage in verbal abuses, fake news or speeches. Keep dealing with issues that will bring progress. You win the hearts and minds of the people by being above board, by being civil, patriotic, and showing empathy. Let's join hands to make the 2023 elections peaceful. A message from the National Orientation Agency.
But in a situation where you find that they look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that.
All right, thank you for staying. You're watching Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital. Time now for us to take a look at the dailies on Daybreak, giving us a sense of what's happening as far as the front pages of our newspapers are concerned. And we'll begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. It says, the lead story says, brain drain. Nigeria's doctor-patient ratio now 1,000 to 5,000. The writer says less than 30,000 practicing, according to the Nigerian Medical Association. And then you have more planning to leave as manpower shortage bites harder. Minister advocates instant replacement for departing doctors. And also you'd have the infograph there basically showing you the doctor-to-patient ratio in Nigeria. There you have it. And then, of course, it says current number of medical doctors in Nigeria, 30,000. Registered doctors since 1960. We have a total of 80,000 in the country, and then an average of between 200 to 300 of my colleagues leave the country every 2 months, says Dr. Ishaya. Now, above that, you'd see 63 days after Kaduna DPO kidnapped on duty, still in captivity. That's on page 5. You also find aviation crisis unresolved despite $256 million released to foreign airlines. That's on page 25. E-Naira won't take over financial services of commercial banks. CBN director on page 26. Beside the infograph, why Kwankwaso Obi Alliance collapsed. Professor Alakali on page 32. Touch Bank gets approval to start 100 billion naira sukuk bond, and that's on page 25. Bandits abduct 8 farmers in FCT community. These are the stories on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper.
Moving on now to the Nation newspaper, where the big story says, Obasanjo, I have no preferred candidate but national agenda. ex-president visits Babangida Abdulsalami Ogwani. And then, of course, just below the headline is a pictorial showing the visit by former President Obasanjo to the former head of state, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, in Mina at the weekend. Just below that, ASU to review 6-month-old strike. Why government can't ban union, says Palana. And then just at the strip just down, Lagos airport cleaner in NDLEA's net for leading drug syndicate. And on top of the page, federal government to block illegal diversions on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Story on page 27. And beside that, Wiki gets Rivers PDP backing on call for IU's removal. It's a story on page 4. Beside that, Lagos NURTW leader killed in cult clash. Story on page 6. And then Ondo teachers don't enroll your kids in private school. Ondo to teachers don't enroll your kids in private schools. And below the masthead, kidnapped police officers freed. Gunmen kill hotelier, 3 others. A story on page 6. And lastly, how Nigeria can benefit from stable oil market, which is a story starting from the front page with the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Mr. Timi Praise Silva, illustrating it. So these are stories on the front page of today's The Nation newspaper.
All right, next, let's take a look at the Blueprint newspaper. There you have quite interesting stories. The lead story is a political story. It says, PDP crisis, Wike list fresh conditions for Atiku reconciliation. It has the writers that says, PDP flag bearer working with my enemies. Ex-VP can't push out secondus, others, party source. And then you also have, for fear of unknown, IU keeps NEC meeting in abeyance. That's a NWC member. Shekarau dumps Kwankwaso, returns to PDP today. You have just below the masthead, 2023, I have national agenda, not preferred candidate, says former President Olusegun Obasanjo. And then non-payment, underpayment of bill threatening operations, Kaduna Electric. NIPR, Malagi assures Kaduna chapter of continued mentorship. You also find surveillance contract. Ex-militants threaten shutdown of oil production in Akwa Ibom. And then you also have, at the very bottom, investment banks ranks Dangote, Bua, Africa's biggest cement makers. Blockage of grains shipments on Black Sea, reason for food price hike, says the Central Bank of Nigeria. Buni approves employment of 134 nurses, places 167 students on allowance. Gunmen kill hotel owner, 2 others in Ebonyi community. Flood renders hundreds of homeless in Jigawa, cuts off 2 bridges. These are the stories on the Blueprint newspaper this morning.
Moving on to the Punch newspaper, from the top banner, we have a story saying FG rakes in 1.09 trillion from indirect taxes. This is story on page 27. Unpaid salaries, Plateau, Benue, Ondo workers, others grown. A story on page 2. And contributory pension assets hits 14.36 trillion. Next to it, ASU strike enters 196th day. Union decides today. Beside the masthead, aviation sector's GDP crashes by 61% amid crisis. It's a story with detail on page 26. And then the main story, the lead story on this morning's Punch newspaper is also politics. PDP and NWC divided over IU chairman's fate uncertain. It has riders. One says, I have no problem being loyal to Wiki Makinde. Deputy chairman, I have no problem been loyal to Wiki and Makinde, according to Deputy National Chairman of the party, Arapaja. Then party in dilemma over successor if Ayu resigns. Spokesman says NWC not divided. Atiku others receive Shekarau back to PDP. Obasanjo touts national agenda. Below that, we have a pictorial and story saying Libyan factional government clash, 32 killed, 159 injured. And at the very bottom of the page, Lassa fever cases now 894, Ondo Edo lead. Beside that, 30,000 died of air pollution in Lagos, according to LASEPA. Accident kills 3 commuters decry. Let me take that again. Accident kills 3 commuters decry Lagos Ibadan highway gridlock. Story on page 4 and 5 of today's The Punch newspaper. So this and many other stories can be found in today's edition of The Punch newspaper.
All right, and then on the News Direct newspaper, you have the lead story talking about the 5.8 billion naira electricity debt. Stakeholders kick over sustenance of electricity supply to Togo, Niger, and Benin. You also find other stories there above the masthead. 14.6 billion naira national carrier operation not feasible, says stakeholders. Oil theft figures outrageous, unrealistic, Chief of Naval Staff. Industry still conglomerate to invest $500 million in Ogun. You also will see other stories below the pictorial. Pantami excited with unprecedented 18.44%, highest ever ICT contribution to Nigeria's GDP. Glow clocks 19, reaffirms excellent service delivery. Back to school, EcoBank Nigeria unveils special scheme on loans remittances. Honorable Abiante commissions constituency project at Ngo. So these are the stories on the News Direct newspaper.
Next, now take a quick look at the Guardian newspaper, where the Business Day newspaper this morning, where the top story is saying, where the top story of the Business Day says Nigeria defies global headwinds with faster economic growth, GDP growth presently surprising, Rwane's FDC says. Then by the right side, Lafarge, MB, Stambik lead in women's representation on boards. And below that, commercial paper issuance rises as firms raise 249 billion naira. Below that, UK students' visa to Nigerians surge 223 in 1 year. And Nestle, 4 others, transport costs hit 43 billion in 6 months. These are stories on the front page of today's the Business Day newspaper. Just before we close on that, 2 more. Nigeria's best performing sectors in Q2. Its details can be found on page 4. And then, of course, worst performing sectors in the Q2 of the year. Of course, it's part of the story talking about the economic growth, which is the main lead of today's the Business Day newspaper.
All right. All right. So with that, let's take perspectives on some of the stories on the front pages. Like we told you, we have Mukhtar Suleiman, a public affairs commentator, in the studio with us to give perspectives to some of the stories. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Well, beginning with the lead story on the Daily Trust newspaper, quite an insightful story. Anyways, it's an analysis and giving you a sense of what's really going on with the health sector in Nigeria. And from what we are seeing, the story says we have the doctor-patient ratio in Nigeria is now 1 to 5,000 people. That's against the 1 to 600 that the WHO has, has, I would say, set a standard for countries. What's the meaning of this, really? Because it's unbelievable.
I think it still boils down to what's the open secret we all know in the country, which is that people are actively looking for greener pastures where they can actually get sustainable income to actually sustain their standard of living, especially in this global economic turmoil that the world is actually suffering. I have a cousin who's a doctor who is set to about to leave the country as well. It seems like Nigeria is not doing as much as it should to value the talent that it has. While it is no secret, while we'll say we cannot deny that the education that we've received is somewhat affordable for us to be able to go abroad and go and practice actively, but you still also have to ensure that you pay people enough to retain them to stay in their positions. And I think that's one of the places that Nigeria has fallen short of significantly across almost every sector. Remote work is now becoming a thing, even these days, especially in creative sectors. I have a friend of mine who works for certain companies in the US, and he's being paid annually in hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you get to see that people who don't want to leave don't want to work for Nigeria. They want to work remotely for a company somewhere else that can pay them in that dollars that they can actually use to maintain certain standards of living. And because I've said this before, it is one thing when the country is suffering and you could see that, oh, the government is trying really hard to salvage the situation. But it's another thing when you see that the country is suffering and the people are living, the government is living la vida loca. Like they're just spending as much as they can. You see them in flashy cars, flashy houses. And that doesn't bode well, honestly, especially for the labor market.
Well, you know, one issue is that a lot of people also criticize the persons leaving, especially medical doctors who are trained in public universities, that it is immoral or perhaps unpatriotic that you leave the country despite the health need of the people, despite the money spent on training, and then go to another place for personal prosperity. How do you see that?
The concept of morality is a very gray area. And yes, patriotism matters, but patriotism is two ways, both ways. I should be patriotic to the country should also be patriotic to me as a citizen. Because now, what they feel is, I have spent these whole years in school, suffered as much as I can. Like I said from the beginning, it's a given. The education system is affordable for them to be able to go and, at that standard, to still be able to practice at a global level. I agree fully 100% with that. But beyond that idea of what patriotism means, the question is, what's the country going to give back to me? I know doctors that are suffering just to feed on a daily basis. For those of them who manage to actually stay in private practice, they cannot advance to a better level because of the workload that exists in the private practice. And for them to actually even move abroad, it's not that cheap. It's not as easy as most people think.
Exactly, which is one of the issues that I want to raise as well.
I would remember that my cousin was telling me about how much the exams he needed to write. There's one they write in Lagos first. There's one they write that's regional for West Africa. There's another one he had to travel to the UK to write one and then come back. It's not as cheap as we think it is. It's actually very, very, very expensive. And all of it is so that they can also get a better life for themselves. And that is very paramount, because if the country wants to keep them, then the country should do more. Because now, invariably, what we are saying is, take for instance, you work in a company and you know your worth as a person. You see your colleagues in other organizations that are being paid very well for your worth. And then there's an opening for you to move and get a better offer. And you say, just because the company is somewhat personal, or I have to be loyal, I'm not going to.
No, but you know, Mukhtar, this is beyond that. This is not a company, this is a country.
I agree.
A country above, where a lot of these doctors were given nearly free education.
I agree.
So that's the question. Like, if what does it cost you? If you are, for example, going to do, it's different if somebody goes to pay, through their nurses in maybe UK or any other place, and, that is self-sponsorship. But a lot of the people, especially who attended public universities in Nigeria, nearly, qualify as medical doctors using just a pittance because we don't pay tuition fee. Compared to other countries, our education is heavily subsidized. That's the issue. It's not about, I don't think the example of a company and, private entities and an employer really fits this scenario.
I do agree with you. Like I said earlier, again, I'm just going to reiterate that it is nearly cheap, the education that we got. And it sounds unfair, but at the very least, you see that even the standard of the hospitals are not at par. They are really terrible. You see that the remittances are poor. We're just seeing a report about pension just before the program started. You work the entirety of your life only for your pension. The pension is a contributory effort between you and your employer, where I put in some percentages of my salary, you help me augment that, and at the end of the day, I don't even get it when I'm done. So instead of stealing and all of that, some people actually find alternative routes that can actually give them a better life, even for now and for their children as well. But sorry, one more thing. I agree that it is not fair, but let me give you an example. A friend of ours who practices in the UK came around the other time and was telling us about a device that if you put it on someone's hand, you can just see a vein and just put in the needle. So my cousin was telling me a story about one of his colleagues as well, who is now practicing in the UK, that the very first time he went to the UK, he was going to put in an IV for someone, and then he was tying the person's hand. They had to call him, they had to do their medical association meeting. They thought he was mad for him to have done that. I agree that, but the country needs to do its own part to ensure that, because the UK citizens, most of them are not moving. Why? The country is doing its own part to keep them.
But again,
so I think we need to do our own part.
Another angle to this, is it really true that, going out there is the way forward, really? Because if you look at it, the countries that we are talking about are also having they are dealing with their own fair share of the inflation and all the other economic problems that we are talking about. So it's more like the case of the higher the pay, the more the problems. The more they pay, the more the bills. Because out there, you pay much more, than you are likely to pay here in terms of bills now.
Let me give you an example of how it works. They say, let's take for instance now, you get a job that pays you $200,000 annually, and this is not for medical doctor standard. So I get a job that pays me $200K in dollars annually, and 40% of that amount is for tax. So I get to keep only 60% for myself. Out of that 40% that is for tax, you know that the system is going to work for you. Your tax that you've paid is actually going to work for you. There's a good transport network, so I don't get to spend a lot of money to commute. There's healthcare and a host of other packages. The 60% I'm going to keep is still like 500% more than what I will earn in Nigeria. So that's often the calculation. And if you look at it, very few Nigerians actually go abroad legally and not make it. Because one, we're very smart, we're very hardworking, we're very fast. I've met somebody from the US who said he doesn't like Nigerians because we're unnecessarily fast for his liking.
Okay, so how can Nigeria make the most of this unfortunate situation? Yes, it's an unfortunate one, but in terms of diaspora remittance, say for instance, is there a chance that we could actually turn this to work in our favor?
I hope. Because then again, it comes back to what we've actually been saying since the beginning of the year. 2023 is going to be a make or mar situation for us. I'm hoping that whoever it is that we get back into the system to become not just even the president, even across board, both the Senate and all of it, can actually sit down together and think of creative and innovative ways to ensure that the economy is favorable for every single person, honestly.
All right, then. Let's take a look at
quite interesting.
other stories.
Yeah. So, I don't know, but there is a story on the front page of Daily Trust regarding DPO that was abducted in Kaduna on his way to report to duty. Yeah. And he's been in detention for quite a number of days. But of course, recently, I've seen another story of another DPO in Zamfara State who was abducted, and I think he spent like 5 days in captivity, but later released. What does this tell us? What do you think of when you think of senior security personnel being abducted like almost everyone else?
It's sad, really. It's painfully sad because if our security infrastructure cannot protect itself from the insecurity itself, then it speaks terribly of the situation that we as ordinary citizens are in. We usually say that we sleep well, we hope to sleep well at night because of the good work our security personnel are putting in to ensure that we have a safe society, but that has not been the case recently. I heard about the story of the DPO earlier, the one that was shot, the aide was killed in Kaduna and then he was taken. That's very, very sad and very, very quite painful. And you would think that, oh, this would stir up action from the security officers and there will be political capital, they'll be able to put pressure on the politicians to ensure that there's political capital to get things done. But it seems as if there's this Coca-Cola effect to these things. When it happens the first time, you know, if you pick up a bottle of Coke and then you shake it and then you open it, there's this surge of gas that comes out. So everybody, in that instant when the thing first of all happens, everybody's just, then it just settles back into the same situation all over again. And it's annoying that this is becoming normal. It's so normal now that sometimes even most of the kidnappings that happened recently along the Kaduna-Abuja Express Road is not even being reported anymore. It's not like it's no longer newsworthy, and that's really, really sad. This should not be a normal thing, and I'm hoping that eventually we can actually see how we can make things better.
All right. So also, there's also another story here on the News Direct. The lead story says stakeholders kick over sustenance of electricity supply to Togo, Niger, and Benin. That's we're talking about 5.8 billion naira electricity debt. Yet, we've continued to supply electricity to these countries.
I understand the whole idea of diplomacy, where you give lesser, because US does it for us and a host of other countries. So it's only normal if we do it for other countries. But you know this thing they say, don't remove the stick from someone's eye unless you've removed the log in yours. For us, I don't know, I don't understand the logic. But then again, somebody else will argue, a US citizen, I have a few of my friends who are US citizens that will also argue that there are poor people in US and yet USA is pumping money to fight poverty in Africa. There are poor people there are homeless people in the US and yet Bill and Melinda Gates is pumping money to fight housing in Africa. So it's weird, the whole concept of foreign policy. You know, it's really, really weird. It's what, you know, we can all just shout and say, this is wrong, but then there are other countries that are doing the same thing.
A lot of people have argued that perhaps this Nigerian status of giant of Africa and then the whole foreign policy of Nigeria perhaps should be reviewed when it comes to, you know, aiding other African countries and then taking that big brother posture on all of that.
If we want to do, I don't know. It's the foreign policy that we actually have has in some ways assisted Nigeria in terms of, like, you go to the African Union, for instance. Most of the staff that are there are Nigerians. Nigerians control most of what happens at the African Union. You go to some other ECOWAS. Nigeria has a lot of power, and because of that, we have some leeway as citizens, even if we're not using them properly these days. It's something, I agree, it should be reviewed, but then again, there is a very gray area between not doing it and then salvaging what is left in your country. It's just a really, really mixed, mashed up. I'm not really a foreign policy person, but it doesn't make sense and it makes sense at the same time. That's what I can say. That's the best I can say. And there's another story there at News Direct again that actually caught my attention, which is the Nigerian carrier not being able, after 14.6 billion has been approved.
National carrier operation not
You're
feasible.
saying that the national carrier is not feasible. I remember last year, Hadi Sirika came to the news. He was so sure that by April this year, it was going to take off and all of that. How much was it that they spent on logo again? It was a lot of money.
Yeah, it was a lot
of money. And then you come out now and tell us that it is not feasible. This is the same headline, I can guarantee you. I remember it was on the news in 2018.
These are actually stakeholders. That's experts who play in the industry.
Yeah, but you could copy this headline and paste it in 2018, from 2018. The same thing in 2017, the same thing in 2020, and yet monies were being approved continuously until this year. For the same thing. It's sickening. Honestly, it's really, really sickening.
All right then. More stories.
Okay, yeah, let's look at the politics. I don't know, what do you make of the posture of the former president Olusegun Obasanjo? He's been moving from one place, from jumping from political meetings in London to now coming to Mina and saying, oh, I have no candidate. But of course, there were stories a few weeks ago that he was galvanizing support for Peter Obi. And then somehow what happened in London between Obi himself and Wike gave credence to that story. But now he's saying, no, I have no candidate, it's only Nigeria. What do you think?
Politics is a game of prostitution. I think we can all unanimously agree on that. Baba he still has a mandate. Like, what I mean, he can still go to the poll and cast a franchise. So to openly say he doesn't have a candidate is something of taking into cognizance the kind of person that he is, and that his person does not, if he wants to openly support a candidate, it might actually cause a lot of ruckus in the country. So he would not want to do that. But he's obviously going to vote for somebody eventually at the end of the day. We might not know who it is, we might end up knowing who it is, but what he says is just a political statement at the end of the day. He has met with almost all the top running mates. It's normal for him to have said that he's a key stakeholder. He's an elder statesman at this point. So he has to say things like that. It's too early for anybody in his status to start saying this is who we are voting for, or who I am not voting for, or who I'm supporting. But eventually he's going to have to vote for one person. He can't vote for everybody. And he cannot say he will not vote.
All right. So in the same breath, we're also talking about the return of Shekarau back to the PDP again after leaving the NNPP.
Yeah.
So Atiku is waiting, is in Kano to receive him and his supporters and all that. Goes back to the issue of what you're saying about
politics, the game of prostitution.
But do we have to be like that? Do things have to be this way?
Last week when we had this conversation, I said, Ganduje just somewhere sipping coffee. As of this morning, early in the morning, I woke up early in the morning, I saw the news, and I was like, okay, interesting, the immediate rise and fall of NNPP. But the weird part of it is the reason behind it. He felt his people were not given key tickets, which I don't think the party leadership of NNPP, in hindsight, did not try to... Politics is a give and take thing. That's how it works. You have to give me something, and I give you back, and we keep going back and forth, exchanging favors. So he didn't feel like his interests were properly catered for by NNPP, and he felt shortchanged. And from what I heard, he had raised this concern severally, even before he became public, and nothing was done about it. He's a key player in the game, so he understands political statements. He understands when someone is just trying to lead him on. So he got angry.
Yeah, there are arguments about his party, his supporters, did not secure the tickets of the party.
Yes, that was primarily...
the primaries and everything. And then also, the counter-argument to that is that they joined the party late, which is why, things turn out to be against them and all that. And denials here and there.
He is a very key person that the NNPP needed. So if it meant ensuring that his interest was properly covered, just for the longevity of what they wanted, the vision of the party, make sure it's a tad happy. Meet him halfway. Meet him somewhere. If that was done, I feel like, okay, fine. They can say, okay, going forward, we'll see how much more we can do. Because it's still a new party. They've not won any elections yet. So, but he didn't feel as if his interest was in any way, even the top priority in any way for the party. And that's why he left.
So maybe let's close still on politics, on this note of the PDP now. The issue of
Wike.
It appears that this difference, as they say, is irreconcilable, is somehow appearing like that. After the meeting with Atiku, news filtered in that he's still insisting on removal of Ayu. And of course, as we've seen in the front page of many papers today, including Punch and The Nation, is like a hard nut to crack. Do you see the PDP cracking this nut and reuniting Wike with Atiku?
On one hand, the way I see it, in my personal opinion, Atiku is trying not to dance too much to Wike's tone, so it doesn't look like Wike has control over him. On the other hand, Wike doesn't want to budge, because if you've dragged up a crisis to this level, it's either you see it through, or you fall out and then you become useless. So that's where it's a power struggle at this point now, and there's a lot of ego around it. Wike feels strongly betrayed by Ayu, and I don't know what the end goal is, but he wants to see to it that, I think he's trying to prove to IU that he has as much power as he
Maybe
claims.
to extract his pound of flesh.
Yes, he wants that. He wants to ensure that he exercises that power that he has claimed that he has. And unless that is done, he's saying that that's the one thing he has held on to ever since. I think he has let go of some of his other demands, but that the party chairman must go. That one is not ready. It's not ready to budge.
All right. Well, thank you so much. At this point, we would end the segment. We appreciate you for coming and sharing your perspectives with us.
Thank you so much for having me, as always.
Yes.
Thank you.
Our guest reviewer is Mukhtar Suleiman. He's a public affairs commentator, talking to us about the stories on the front pages of our newspapers this morning. We'll take a short breather, and then in a short while, we'll be back to continue the program. Please stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that you look at the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, thank you for staying. This is Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital here in Abuja. It's top of the hour. Let's take a look at the headlines again. Atiku, Ayu, Lamido, PDP bigwigs in Kano for Shekarau defection.
I have no special candidate, says Obasanjo after meeting Abdulsalami.
Bandits continue onslaught in Katsina, abduct children, gun down parents.
Now the details. Atiku Abubakar, presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, has arrived in Kano State. The former vice president is expected to welcome former Kano State Governor Senator Ibrahim Shekarau back to the PDP today. Shekarau had dumped the PDP for the All Progressives Congress, APC, in the build-up to the 2019 elections. He was subsequently elected into the Senate on the ruling party's platform. However, he fell out with Governor Abdullahi Ganduje and defected to the new Nigeria People's Party, NNPP. After a few months in the new party, his relationship with Senator Rabiu Kwankwaso went sour after some staunch loyalists of the senator failed to get NNPP tickets to contest elective positions in the forthcoming general elections.
Now, bandits have continued to make life a hell for residents of Katsina State, staging multiple attacks across the state in the last 72 hours. In attacks between Thursday and Saturday, some children were abducted while their parents were killed. On Saturday night, bandits numbering about 20 invaded Bakori community, where they abducted 7 family members of one Malam Montari Samuru, who was inflicted with the machete cut. The attack, according to one Muhammad Sani, was carried out at about 8:15 p.m. when most of the people were observing Shai prayers at the residence of the victim behind Bakori Comprehensive Hospital. Malam Umar Kurami, father of one of the victims, said that the bandits reluctantly spared him but went away with his child.
Former President Olusegun Obasanjo has stated that he has no prepared candidate in the 2023 presidential race. The former president was seen in a meeting which Peter Obi, presidential candidate of Labour Party, had with Governor Nyesom Wike of Rivers State in London. Sources had said the Nigerian leader was pushing the candidacy of Obi. But speaking in Minna, Niger State capital, when he paid a visit to former head of state General Abdulsalam Abubakar on Sunday, Obasanjo said he had a national agenda, not a prepared candidate. Abdulsalami had handed over power to the civilian administration of Obasanjo in 1999, ending the military interregnum.
All right, now let's take a look at the focus of our discussion today. At least 50 people have died and many displaced after recent torrential rains caused flooding in northern parts of the country. Survivors in these communities are counting their losses as flood destroyed property worth millions of naira. Let's take a look at this report now.
A visit to places affected by the flood, residents of Daybreak were seen searching and evacuating their property destroyed by the flood, while some were busy evacuating refuse from the drainages. Counting their losses, an aged woman, Rabi Mohammed, blind man, Abdullahi Ademu, and a retired permanent secretary in the state, Ishak Bunu, who are among those whose houses were totally destroyed by the rain, described the situation as unfortunate and called on government, individuals, and other authorities concerned to come to their aids. Reacting to the incidents, the overseer of Daybreak Development Area, Dauda Danladi Abu, said the disaster sickness and impending hunger and hardship in the locality because several farmlands and foodstuffs were affected.
I've been experiencing this thing, I think, for the past 2 or 3 months, to the point that I even wrote to the Ministry of Environment. I wrote to the chairman of the local government council so that the government should come to our aid. And it is like the issue is still in the increase. It's increasing day by day. And this thing that happened is a bitter experience.
Also speaking, the Sangarin Dedere, Said Al-Hassan Balarabi, who spoke through the district head of Dedere, Hassan Abdullahi Al-Hassan, enjoined people of the area to take precaution serious against reoccurrence of the incidents and call on the state government to assist the affected persons.
As you can see, this is the situation where residents of Dedere community have found themselves this morning. The flood has rendered many homeless, as you can see them, from Dedere community in Obi local government. Audi Ilya, NBS News.
Now, to discuss this shortly, we will have the Director General and the Chief Executive Officer of the National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency, Professor Aliyu Jauro, who will be talking to us about this. But just before then, let's take a short breather, and then when we return, the discussion begins.
Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
My people, how do you feel when you see bulldozers demolish beautiful but illegally built private houses, estates, or plazas? Agony and pain. That is exactly what the FCT administration feels also. No responsible government is happy to inflict pain on her people by demolishing any property. Are you planning to acquire a piece of land? Avoid buying land from indigents or local chiefs or any other unauthorized source, as doing so could ruin your valuable investment. Only the Minister of FCT allocates land in Abuja. So, to acquire a piece of land in Abuja, go to the Abuja Geographic Information Systems, popularly known as AGIS, and obtain the relevant application form. Also, visit the FCDA Mass Housing Department to check the genuineness of land title before you acquire any property in any of the housing estates in Abuja. Do the right thing. Don't be a victim. This message is from the Federal Capital Territory Administration.
All right, thank you for staying. Now, before we begin the discussion with the Director General of the National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency, Professor Aliyu Jauro, will be joining Dr. Dahir Muhammad, an environmentalist and climate change expert over in our Kano studio, to also give us some kind of background to what we are dealing with right now. So, good morning, Dr. Dahir. Thank you for joining us on Daybreak. Okay, it appears that we've lost Dr. Dahir, but we'll try to reconnect back to him. Thank you for joining us, Professor Aliyu Jauro. We appreciate you. Thank you for joining us on Daybreak.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm sure that while waiting, you've watched the story about the flood situation in Nasarawa State. We understand that about at least 43,000 people have been affected by this flooding from the beginning of the year till this moment, particularly in the northeastern part of the country. I would like to know, what's the response of your agency as regards these flooding incidents in recent times?
Well, the response of the National Environmental Standards and Regulation Enforcement Agency is, first of all, what we always engage in is to sensitize the general public on what they need to do in order to have preventive measures. Because when you look at the causes of this flooding, most of them are man-made. So we try to avoid some of these factors that causes this flooding. We are going to save a lot of lives and properties from being lost. One of our major problems, if you look at it, we don't have adequate drainage systems. Most cities, especially, well, cities, some of them have some level of drainages. But if you go to our rural areas, there's nothing like any form of drainage. They just rely on the natural ones. Secondly, the issue of the waste management. We do just dump our waste anyhow, thereby blocking our drainages. So whenever there's any torrential rain, it's very hard for this rain to find a way out. So we end up having these issues of flooding. So annually we go out to sensitize the general public. Our state offices currently are doing that all over. Secondly, we engage with regular stakeholders to brainstorm and find ways out of this flooding incidents. We work together with agencies like NIMET, NEMA, and other agencies. We always come together. And thirdly, we have a regulatory framework. We have the National Environmental Soil Erosion and Flood Control Regulations. So there are specific guidelines there. So we always go out to regulate the activities of individuals and corporate bodies in order to control this issue of flooding. So in that regulation I'm talking about, it is put in place in order to minimize losses that will occur due to either soil erosion or flooding, and the regulation is meant also to safeguard the human health and the environment. And also it is meant also to minimize all land disturbing activities that would end up dumping a lot of sandy and silty materials into water bodies, thereby polluting the water bodies. So we go out to ensure that people comply. So apart from that, we also have other regulations that are also tailored towards controlling this issue of flooding. For instance, we have national environmental construction sector regulations. You know, construction sector is one of the sectors also that contribute to some of these issues of flooding. Mm-hmm. Some people will just go and erect a building on the floodplains or any flood area. So when it rains, certainly most of this rainwater is going to have an impact. So we also have all these provisions. When you are going to embark on this construction, there is need for you to make adequate provision for storm water that may arise due to this construction. You must abide by all the building guides, codes and guidelines, that is by getting the necessary approvals and all other things. So these are few of the regulations. We have other forms of regulations that even protect some of this marine environment. Okay. Rivers, lake shores, all of this type of settings, we have regulations that are tailored towards protecting them.
Okay, one key thing which is your agency is directly responsible is the issue of industrial pollutants. To what extent are the byproducts or even activities of industries contribute in contaminating the environment, especially factors that aid issues like flooding and others?
Well, if you talk about industries, we have different types of industries, and the type of impact that is generated depends on the activity of the industry. So if you talk about chemical industries, certainly when they carry out their processes, one of the byproducts they may generate may impact on the air quality.
I'm talking of things like polythene, for example, which is a lot of times it's mentioned when we are discussing things like like flooding and others.
Okay, so when it comes to that, you are talking about issue of plastics.
Yes.
Yes, this is a worldwide issue because these plastics now, we know that they don't just degrade easily. So when you litter it anyhow, when it rains, so rainwater will just carry most of this. These are some of the wastes I'm talking about. So when it washes them, it's one of the major issues we are having. So it ends up blocking our drainages. So one of the things we are working on now is the adoption of the circular economy. So how do we go about this circular economy? Presently, we are implementing what we call the extended producer responsibility. Whoever generates any form of material is saddled with the responsibility of taking it out of the environment and recycling it. So it's part of the polluter pays principle. So they're expected to make provision. If you produce any plastic material, you should set aside some amount of money so that when this material comes to its end of life, so it will be taken out of the environment and recycled. So the type of EPR we're implementing presently in Nigeria is industry-driven. So already they have come together to form what we call the Producer Responsibility Organization, the PROs. So for the one dealing with plastics, certainly we know the industries that generate these plastics, that uses them. We have the food and beverages sector. So when we talk about the food and beverages sector, are those sectors that produce some of these soft drinks, the bottled water we drink. So daily, if you look at it, people use some of these materials. So how do we take care of this? So they have come together to form what we call Food and Beverages Recycling Alliance. So these food and beverages recyclers have this PRO, and the PRO is a third party that is saddled with the responsibility of managing the issue of collection of this waste and also recycling. So the industries are expected to fund the activities of the PRO. So when we do that, the issue of plastic waste is going to be solved. And presently, you know, if you go around, you see scavengers in the morning going around picking some of these plastic bottles. So already we have started.
And I mean, talking about scavengers, that in itself, it's been engrossed in some kind of controversy in recent times. The Nigerian police and the FCT administration, for instance, in the FCT, have raised, concerns about suspicion and on security threats as a result of the activities of scavengers. In fact, there's a ban on the activities of scavengers in the FCT and all of that. So how is that, affecting, what we need to do as far as safeguarding the environment?
In fact, that's one of the main roles of the PRO, the Producer Responsibility Organization. So they manage the issue of collection and recyclers. So part of their roles is to formalize the issue of collection. So those people we call scavengers, we look at them as miscreants. So they are going to be trained and equipped with all necessary tools. They need to have the personal protective equipment, dress well, and have all the necessary backing. They should have like ID card. They are going to be registered so that they will be recognized. Likewise, the PRO is going to provide some support, financial support, to some of these collectors. So they are going to subsidize the issue of this collection. So when it is gathered, they also take it to the recyclers. Likewise, they are going to provide some funding for the recycler in order to recycle some of this plastic waste.
Beyond, the world is somehow moving away from recycling to encouraging biodegradable containers. We seems to be lagging behind. What are we doing about that?
Well, I don't think we are lagging behind, but the implementation, it goes in stages. If you listen to news, some countries have already banned the use of single-use plastics. Single-use plastics are the plastics you use and dump. So they have already outlawed that. So even in Nigeria, there was a lot of moves in proposing to ban this single-use plastics instantly. Well, you cannot just ban the usage without making provision. So there are a lot of provisions on ground, and there's a date that is set when this single-use plastics will be banned. I thought, if I've not forgotten, I think it's by there 2030 we are going to ban the use of this single plastics.
But do you think we are ready for that in Nigeria?
Well, I think we are ready, because by then I believe we must have come up with...
This is 8 years away.
Yes, it's possible. Some have achieved that within a very short time. So I think it's feasible.
Okay. All right. So to what extent would you say that urban expansion is affecting the efforts of your agency in making sure that we have a sane environment? We've had, cases of compromise by urban planners where people allocated lands where they shouldn't be, issues of corruption in the service and all that. How is that impacting on your own efforts?
It's really a serious challenge. As you have said, Nigeria is a population of 217 million. And we know there's always an influx of migrants into the urban areas. They always migrate. So certainly we have this issue of expansion. So this expansion is really a very, very big challenge. For instance, farmlands are taken over where buildings are erected. When these buildings are erected, most of us are in the habit of using concrete on the surfaces. If you go out, you see everywhere is concrete. So as related to what we are discussing, flooding. So when it rains, the water will not find adequate place to percolate if it wants to do that. So it's one of the factors leading to flooding. Likewise, with this expansion, there is an increase in the waste generation. And our waste management policy is not good enough. So when this huge amount of waste is generated, it becomes a problem. When it rains, as I've mentioned, the rain will carry it and dump it in our drainages. When it does that, and these issues are also associated with a lot of epidemics like cholera, and we know when the water is trapped, it becomes a breeding ground for mosquitoes. So we have a lot of issues like malaria, we have like typhoid fever and other things. So it's a big challenge, and as you have said, there are a lot of compromise. You find out that there's an adequate and well-developed plant, but at the end of the day, people will not abide by it. They find their way, one way or the other, in order to expand either their building beyond the actual plan. So when they do that, it affects a lot of things. For instance, somebody may just go and build on the waterway, and the regulatory body responsible may just look the other way. So we can rule out the issue of corruption. If you don't insist on doing the right thing, certainly we are going to continue facing some of these problems.
Okay. Let's talk about air pollution. Only this morning, there are reports from the Lagos Environmental Protection Agency saying that 30,000 people die of air pollution. To what extent is this air pollution affecting the health of Nigerians?
It's a serious issue. You know, a clean air is good for healthy living, not only we human beings, our plants and animals. So if you look at it, the activities of human beings have impacted seriously on the environment. We use motor vehicles, we use generators to generate power. So we burn these fossil fuels. When we burn them, we release a lot of pollutants, ranging from sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and most of these pollutants, when they go up, they combine together to form some of these particulate matters. And we inhale them. Some of them, when you inhale, they go deep down into your lungs. As a result of that, some of them may even have some of these hydrocarbons that are carcinogenic, some of these aromatic hydrocarbons. And when they are inhaled, they cause a lot of health problems, cancers, a lot of respiratory diseases. So I agree with the report from Lagos. Maybe even 30,000 is underestimation because, you know, in Nigeria we don't have a strong means of data collection and analysis, and not everybody goes to the hospital. So it's a serious problem if you don't address the issue of...
So what is Nigeria doing about it?
We are doing a lot. For instance, I just mentioned one source of air pollution when I mentioned the transport sector and also the power sector. I just mentioned generators. So apart from that, we have industries I've mentioned that indulge in the production processes, and they also use generators to generate their power. So they release a lot of pollutants into the atmosphere. So we regulate their activities. Presently, we have 35 environmental regulations. So about 9 of these regulations are on these industries. So we go to ensure that they do the right thing. We issue out what we call permit, air quality and waste and toxic substance permit, because we go and check what they do, and we always require them to apply it for that, so that we ensure that what they release into the environment is within the allowed limits. There are limits to which, for instance, if your process is a wet process, at the end of the day, you are going to have a waste liquid. So before you discharge this liquid into the environment, you are expected to treat it, to remove all the hazardous components. So it's not possible to remove everything 100%. So there's a specific limit to which you are expected to reduce the concentration of these hazardous components before you release the water into the environment. So we monitor the activities. And for the transport sector, we are currently working on a program which we call National Vehicular Emission Control Program, where all vehicles will be subjected to annual testing. There is a standard, so we compare with the standard to ensure that they are emitting within that standard. If they are not, the owner of the vehicle will be given a certain amount of time to go and fix his vehicle. So likewise, we have another program, the National Generator Emission Control Program also, which is tailored towards controlling the emission emanating from these generators. So all these programs on ground in order to ensure that we have air quality, and there is also a regulation that prohibits open burning. Open burning is one of a serious contributor to a poor air quality. We are in the habit of gathering our refuse, setting it on fire. So this is one of the major problems. When you burn, you add a lot of pollutants into the atmosphere. Not only those that are good enough, some of them are even carcinogenic, because you burn some plastics. When they burn, they generate organic substance. like what we call the furans and dioxins, and they are serious carcinogens, and we end up inhaling them. So we need to do a lot in order to secure the environment.
All right then. So we'll take a short breather now, and then while we are doing that, we'll take a report from Kaduna, talking about flooding again in Kaduna State. And then when we return, the discussion on the program will continue. Please stay with us.
Every patriotic Nigerian should hear this. Any politician who means well for the people will never allow themselves or their supporters to engage in any violent, destructive activities. No politician who truly wants to serve the people and develop the nation will encourage his followers to destroy properties or take human lives before, during, or after the elections. The Nigerian public must watch out for these traits and isolate any politician who encourages supporters to engage in violence. No genuine politician or patriot will cause trouble and seek to destroy the very society which they aspire to lead or develop. Politicians who have the good of the people at heart will not allow themselves or their followers to engage in violence, destruction of properties, and then taking of lives. Be vigilant. By their words you shall know them. Shun violence. Stay away from politicians who want you to do so. Let's join hands to make the 2023 elections peaceful. This message is from the National Orientation Agency, NORA.
This cemetery is about 4 decades old. A resident of Fine Territory community buried their loved ones here. In recent times, inhabitants of the area are experiencing worrying development as decomposing human parts are often seen in the ditch and had to be buried again by the community. The erosion created holes in the graves, and the water flushed out the corpses from the graves. Many corpses were flushed out by the water. From here, you can see some holes with corpses inside. We hardly sleep when it is raining because the water submerges our houses and also the cemetery. The cemetery lies between two parts of High Territorial community situated on a hilly landscape. The erosion is created by waterway that flows from the community to its base where the cemetery is located and gradually expanded into drainage. Despite several community efforts, the erosion persists. We forwarded our complaints to the local government chairman. He was here and said the situation, but up till this moment, nothing has been done to curb the problem. The Igabi local government chairman Jabri Kami says the whole area is at risk, including the cemetery. He said last year he led a team from the Federal Ministry of Environment to inspect such affected areas within the local government, adding that erosion control is the responsibility of the federal government.
Corpse flooding the water, there's no cover. Maybe there will, one or two, you will see a bond and other things, but not a complete corpse. We are doing all the necessary arrangement to see that we overcome this issue. But you have to know one thing, the control of the erosion is a federal government issue. But thank God, it is yesterday because of this territorial cemetery erosion, I heard that we got the ecological fund from the federal government, and by inshallah, we are going to share it within the local government of the state. But they are waiting for the plan, that is how to spend the money.
One of the major challenges facing the Gasa community is erosion. Beside Toro Toro Cemetery, a cemetery at Laimbilia in the same Rigasa community is also affected by a gully erosion. Bella Musa, Trust TV News, Kaduna.
Well, that reports from Kaduna State, adds to the conversation we are having regarding the environment, safety of the environment, and what to do about it. And we've been discussing in the studio here with the Director General, Chief Executive Officer of the National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency, NESREA, Professor Aliu Joro. Thank you for staying with us, Prof. Now, you've seen this issue of erosion in Kaduna. What are the, environmental hazards that long-term erosion causes in the long run?
Well, we have seen what happened in Rigasa community. Even the dead ones are not spared. It has already eroded the cemetery, exposing the degraded dead bodies. So these are some of the effects. So it's not only the cemetery that is affected, the farmlands. The erosion will come and clear the plantations. And when it does that, it goes away with the topsoil. The topsoil is the soil that contains the nutrients. So even after this flooding, for instance, next year, when they plant, they are not going to get any significant yield because the nutrients have gone. Likewise, it washes the houses when it rains a lot. So means of livelihood will also be lost, including the human lives and animals. So it's a serious issue. If nothing is done about it, we are not going to achieve most of these sustainable development goals, because about 9 of the 8 SDGs are impacted by this problem. We are talking about zero hunger, poverty eradication, clean water and sanitation, for example. If you look at them, you cannot achieve them with this issue of flooding. When you have floods, as I've mentioned, it clears all the farmlands, the croppings, so you are not going to eradicate poverty, especially in that very community. Not only that community. For instance, most of the food we consume in Nigeria are those that are produced by the subsistence farmers. Those little clay farmers we see in villages cultivating their land, they contribute a lot. So with this level of flooding, they will lose their farmlands, so will not get adequate yield. Livelihoods are lost, lives and properties. So you cannot be able to even quantify the amount of losses associated with this.
Okay, did you come back to you? If you hold on a bit, I want to reconnect with Dr. Ahir Mohammed from Kano, an environmentalist who is championing clean environment campaign in Kano. Good morning, Dr. Tairo, and thank you for joining us this morning. Okay, so quickly, we've been witnessing flood all over the country, especially even in Kano where you are. There have been reports of flood, including around markets and residential areas. What's the cause of this increasing or heightening incidences of flood?
Well, Mala Abdulaziz, I think in the very first place there is a need for us as a community to understand that this flooding is a worst natural disaster we are having alongside earthquake. You see, there are different types of flooding, of course, but here in Kano, it's mostly due to poor urban planning. You find people building on waterways, and then you find, apart from building on waterways, you find people dumping refuse whenever there is rainfall and all of that. But in the same time, there is another global issue, which is more about the earth getting warmer. When the earth is warmer, the air tends to hold more
A
humidity.
young man and his
Rainfalls come in a very large amount. And then there is this another issue of rising sea levels. But in Kano, in Kano at this time, I think more of what we're having is due to this poor urban planning.
All right. Okay, so at your own, based on what you have observed in Kano, what are you doing to sensitize the people? Yes, we understand the issue of, poor urban planning and also the issue of waste management as big issues. So it means that there is need for more sensitization. There is need for more awareness to be created. What kind of engagements do you have with, the communities that you interface with?
Well, as usual, we always try to create this awareness and then sensitize the community on the effect of this flooding, considering that it is of people. And then at the same time, we have very little to do at our level. Since when we look at the cause, we will see that mostly due to greed and corruption, because there is no way someone will just come and build on waterways. And from our own part, we are trying to enlighten the community to observe, to realize that it's a cumulative effort for us to build a better society. There is no point someone will just pick up, refuse and just drop them anywhere that person likes, and those refuse will lead to the blockage of waterways. And at the same time, we are championing the tree planting campaign in Kano. Currently, this rainy season, we are planting 100,000 trees in partnership with the Federal Ministry of Environment. And the reason why we are planting that is in order to improve the air quality and cooling effect. This excessive heat is what leads to this rise in temperature, high humidity in the air, as I said earlier. And then even when you look at it globally, whenever there is this excessive heat, it tends to the expansion of water molecules. And once there is that expansion, it leads to the increase of the air quantity. And there is this issue of melting ice sheet. And this is not something we in Kano are going to do alone. I think this is something that, although the issue is a global challenge, but it needs to be addressed through, national approach. So this is what we are doing in Kano, creating the awareness and then doing our own part. But the government has to do more because it has to do with policy making, it has to do with regulation, it has to do with ensuring that people are living within law and order.
Okay, you mentioned the global dimension of this problem, and of course the United Nations Convention on climate change. This COP conference is coming on in a few weeks from now. And to what extent do you think the world is really serious and committed, especially the big countries that are the highest emitters of these dangerous gaseous substance, are to having a safer climate, or a safer earth generally?
You see, even during the Eastwell Climate Summit in Paris, I think the sole issue why they initiated that is because there is this issue of rising temperature, and the thing is not that the earth is getting warmer, but it started getting warmer too fast. So honestly, countries were tasked to offer their own, maybe ambitious target, but a lot of these biggest polluters in the world have failed to do that. Today, you find out that even, let's say, during the administration of Trump, you find out that USA are moving out of this agreement. Tomorrow, you heard that Chinese are not doing their own part, and these countries are the biggest polluters we are having. So they are the one that needs to do more. And there is always the issue of funding, although this funding issue doesn't even comes to places like ours, but because the government are not even trying to tap into these opportunities. And I think if we can come up with good proposals, like earlier in your discussion, I had the issue of how we can cut down carbon emissions. We look at our population, for example, here in Kano, we look at the rate we're emitting CO2. All of these are mostly, man-made issues. So if we can come up with proposal, and then maybe the climate initiative, I think we can be able to do more than what we are doing now.
All right, thank you, Dr. Dahir Muhammad, for your thoughts, for joining us on Daybreak and sharing your perspectives. Dahir Muhammad is an environmentalist and climate change expert. Thank you. We appreciate you for joining us on Daybreak.
Yeah, you're most welcome.
All right. So let's get back to Professor Aliyu Jaru here in the studio. Well, you've heard what he has said. I recall that in the last COP26 meeting, the president made a promise to how that Nigeria is committed to net zero emissions by 2060 and all of that. And there are some experts who have said that, well, what's on ground for us to realize that? I mean, how realistic is that, for us to achieve and all of that? So what are we doing as regards realizing that?
I think Nigeria is on course. Recently, the Climate Change Commission was established by Mr. President, and the director was appointed. And even last week, the Honorable Minister of Environment flagged off the carbon trading scheme, which is one of the robust mechanisms to allow us as a nation to achieve this net zero. It has to do with the trading of the emission that is well established in other developed countries, which encourages industries to cut down their emissions so that they gain a lot. So you can trade out, you take a target and see if you cut it down, and you can trade it, you get a lot of money. And likewise, Nigeria is going to embark on massive tree planting. And when you plant to these trees, those that will serve as a carbon sink, they absorb the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And this carbon dioxide is one of the major culprits contributing to the
It appears that we have, other challenges that we are dealing with. Recently, we've seen some kind of energy crisis in Nigeria, and especially if you look at the price of cooking gas, for instance, it's on the high, hitting the skies, and people are now considering their options, going back to use of charcoal. How is that going to impact on the efforts that we are making in this regard?
In fact, it's a serious issue. If we don't address the issue of clean cooking fuel, it's going to be very difficult for us to achieve the net zero, as you have said, because people will go and continue cutting down these trees, not only to produce the charcoal. Some use the wood as firewood. You go to our rural areas, there's nothing like cooking gas. Unless we look at this issue and address it, make provision and subsidize it, really is going to be very, very difficult for us to achieve. But the major challenge is presently this cooking gas, most of it is even imported into the country. So there's need for us to double our effort and ensure that this cooking gas is produced locally and is subsidized so that people can afford, in order to look away from the other sources, as you have said, the charcoal and the firewood.
So, this energy transition also is not cheap, for developing countries like Nigeria. I'm aware of the climate finance support Is Nigeria, benefiting from that at the moment?
We are not benefiting much for now because there are a lot of requirements that we need to fulfill. Well, I think we are strategizing to see how we can access some of these funds in order to address these issues. Before you get these funds, you need to generate a lot of data. You have to justify that you need them before you get them. But I believe we are working towards that, especially with the establishment of the Climate Change Commission. And in the Federal Ministry of Environment, we have a department for this, for the climate change. And with the launching of the carbon trading, so we are coming to that by God's grace. It wouldn't take us a long time before we achieve that.
Okay, the organic cleanup has been going on for years, and then there is a surge in activities of oil bunkers and people breaking, pipelines, stealing oil and all that. How is that like? Is that rolling back perhaps what government intend to achieve with the organic cleanup?
Well, the issue of organic cleanup is not within the purview of my agency.
What I'm talking about is the fact that government is doing this cleanup of the environment, and then to what extent is the ongoing activities of oil bunkering and all that affect the environment in the Niger Delta? Let me rephrase it.
I don't think with the activities of these bunkerers, we are going to solve this issue of oil pollution, provided they are going to break the pipelines and they will cut away some volume of this crude oil. And before they do that, most of this crude oil will gush out. And also some of them, even after collection, they're in the habit of even, they will just leave it like that. So even if we clean and you release, so we are not going to solve this issue of the oil pollution, as you have said. The only solution is for them to understand that this environment belongs to them. If they continue to pollute it, there's no way they can have a place to continue to live. And also, we need, as a nation, our security apparatus, they must be up and doing in order to prevent this issue of oil bunkering. Well, we know the challenges. The Niger Delta militants, some of them are even more armed than our security agencies. Likewise, we cannot shun away from issue of corruption. There are a lot of reports saying that some of these security agencies are also involved in this issue of oil bunkering. So we need to sit down and look at the issues holistically for us to save this environment.
All right, so finally, before we leave, I would like to throw this to you. What's your assessment of the response to early warnings by NIMET, from the community, from the local communities, in terms of communication and then their responses? What do we need to do? And
state governments as well.
Yes. There seems to be a breach somewhere.
Yes, I don't think the response is good enough. Our attitude here, even if you send early warning, most people will be adamant. Leave this place, there's a possibility of floods coming. So most people may not leave. So unless the authorities enforce, in some states, they usually carry out an enforcement. Whenever there's an early warning, you send our security officers to forcibly evacuate people, take them to a higher ground. So that is the only solution. I know I read about this Ogun State, they used to do that. So unless you do that, people will not leave the place. Likewise, even some of our subnationals are not serious enough once they receive such early warnings. they don't act. So there's need for us to change the way we do things. As soon as you receive these early warnings, you take the necessary measures. Tell the communities to leave. If they're not ready to leave, forcibly eject them. You have the right to do so. It's your responsibility to protect their lives and properties.
All right. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Aliu Joro, who's been with us discussing the issue of challenges of managing the environment and especially in the face of flood that has been witnessed all over the country and especially in some northern states. And that's been, with this we come to the end of today's edition of Daybreak on Trust Television. And thank you very much for staying with us. And we catch you up, or you catch us up tomorrow at the same time, the same station. My name is Abdulaziz Abdulaziz. Have a good day.
And I am Ayuba Ilya. Watch us via all social media platforms and also watch us live on YouTube. Bye for now.